Thank you. All right, we will call the Budget Committee meeting of the Port of Hood River Commission to order. Still president? Aren't you? I think you are.
We have a current CPR card.
You guys need to elect your officers for the next year. You guys have to do that, not me.
And I'm like John for president, that's what we gotta do, but whatever it is.
I think you need a president and a secretary. Sounds fair to me.
Because somebody needs to go to me, right?
Patty.
Yeah, Patty will be doing it.
Thank you.
Very good.
I'll second that motion.
We need to vote on that. All in favor of the nomination of John Benton as president and Judy Newman as secretary, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, congratulations, thank you. And Kevin, you can start the meeting.
All right, well, I will start with the budget message. First of all, I just really want to thank all of you for participating in the budget committee, but I also want to thank our staff. There's been a lot of changes in the last year administratively, and so just want to give some shout outs to members of the port staff that contributed to developing this budget. Obviously, Debbie, our new finance director, was very instrumental, as was Genevieve Scholl, Greg Hagberry, John Mann, Daryl Stafford, and then Yana Scoggins, who's not, she's back in finance, was also very important in this. And so I really want to give them a shout out, because if it wasn't for their involvement and participation, I would not be able to produce this message. So just a little bit of background: the Port of Hood River operates under ORS 777 and other statutes. And as a public agency, we are required to prepare a budget annually for review and adoption by this group. And then there will be a subsequent adoption by the full commission, likely in June. So this budget message is actually required by state statute, and is really intended to give the budget committee a summary of the issues facing the port and an overview for the 23-24 fiscal year. So this is a plan. It's a planning document, and the proposed budget figures that you see in here are based upon the best estimate of what the port will receive and what the port will spend from July 1 of this year to the end of June of next. And so to prepare this document, we use the past budget year's financial histories and then estimates for the current year to have the expenditures balanced with the revenue. I do want to touch on a few adjustments or themes that are going to be recurrent in this document. There was a resolution passed just a couple of months ago, actually 1 month ago, a couple of weeks ago, that all non-bridge related activities will need to be operating not on bridge tolls, but on self-sufficient operating revenue no later than June 30 of 2026. And so that's a really significant policy statement that the commission made a couple of weeks ago. Another big one is that there was also a resolution to start the process for planning for a new toll increase by September 1 of this year as well, for funding the new Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority. And so you're going to see some items in the budget reflecting that. Another item that I want to bring to your attention is that crime, vandalism, homelessness continues to be a plague. Not just here on port property, but throughout the city. And so we are looking at introducing a security contract in this budget as well to help try to minimize that. We are also looking at a fairly large payoff on the Jensen property loan. And so that will be a way for us to get a little bit more cash flow to make up the loss of tolls in the next few years. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's been significant leadership changes, certainly within the executive director and the finance director, but we also have a new bridge replacement director with Mike Shannon, who replaced me. I was in that position for 4 or 5 years. And then we have new legal team as well with the retirement of Jerry Jakes. So all of these, between Debbie and I, we had less than 12 months on our jobs to prepare this document. And so this setup is really a reflection of the past administrations. And I think that we're both committed to looking at things a little bit differently next year. And so if you see things that you'd like to see modified or adjusted, this is a great time to provide us feedback. We'd also have a number of capital improvement projects in here, and we really try to focus on those capital projects that either generate new revenue or will retain the revenue that is currently being generated, primarily off of our commercial buildings. And I don't want to end on a low note, but it is very important is that the bridge tolls has really supported the waterfront recreation and event center and all of the parks along the waterfront. And so that's really going to continue to be an area of my personal interest, because we, aside from the bridge, those parks and waterfront areas are really the most widely used in the community. So just want to bring those items to your attention. And then on the next page, I just also want to talk a little bit about the tax setup here at the port. So we have a permanent rate of about 3.25%, 3 1/3% per $1,000 worth of assessed value. That means if your home has a real market value of, let's say, $450,000, that works out to $6 a year. That's our impact, the port's impact on the property owner, the tax owner or taxpayer. So that's a pretty small amount in the whole scheme of things. And then much of the basis for this budget comes from the Port Strategic Business Plan and Capital Facilities List that was adopted in 2021. The Port Commission conducted a fall planning session last November and a spring budget planning session, of which some of the budget committee members were participating on in April of this year. And a lot of the feedback that we received from those meetings have worked their way into this document. So with that background, I'm going to jump into the budget. And just, I kind of took a little different approach, because sometimes there's a question about what are funds, what's within the funds. And so I'm going to start with the fact that we've got 5 separate funds. We've got a general fund, we have a revenue fund, and then we have 3 bridge related funds, a bridge repair fund, bridge replacement fund, and a new bi-state bridge replacement fund. So I'm going to start on the general fund, and this serves pretty much as the port's governmental fund. This is the fund that receives the standing property tax, of which $90,000 is budgeted. A portion of administrative staff that is applied overall throughout the port is applied to in the general fund. And you may see a big change in some of the estimates for the current year versus this year. And that's because we weren't paying for some of the executive director and previous finance directors. So we actually, if you look at the current year, it's really low. And so compared to this next year, now that we're fully staffed, there may be a big jump in those 2 columns. So all the costs related to the annual budget, commission executive training, auditing and accounting, admin, building expenses, communications and promotions are all expensed through the general fund. And I will make a note that there was one change in the past. The port's lobbying team contracts had been budgeted for in the general fund. A small portion remains, about $15,000, but most of that has been moved into the bridge replacement fund, because that's where they're doing most of the work. And so, and there is, since there isn't a huge amount of revenue coming into the general fund, primarily due to the lack of taxes, there is a transfer from the revenue fund to backstop those administrative expenses.
But the bridge replacement fund. That's the one that is funded by grants,
Correct. Primarily.
and what's coming out of that bridge replacement fund, one piece of it you're proposing is lobbying. Can you actually do that? Can we pay for lobbying out of grants?
No, but we actually have a transfer in from the revenue fund to cover the cost of lobbying. So it'll be paid out of total revenue.
And I will touch on that as well. So that's how the general fund operates, and then moving to the revenue fund, and this is actually where this is really like an operating fund for the port. So most of the port's activities are business type activities and are accounted for in this revenue fund. And this fund is considered an enterprise fund for intents and purposes. The primary revenue that comes into this fund are all of the bridge tolls, our tenant leases, marina moorage fees, airport hangar and waterfront fees. All of the fees and charges that are collected for operations come into this revenue fund. And then the expenses are also those expenses that are related to operating activities, debt service, and capital outlay for those enterprises takes place as well. So within this revenue fund, the best way I like to think of it is there's departments within the fund, and there are 9 departments or sub-funds that are within the revenue fund, and they are the bridge operations, industrial property, commercial property, waterfront industrial, waterfront recreation, marina, the airport, administration, and maintenance are the fund or the sub-funds or departments within that revenue fund. So the first department is the toll bridge department, and this is really the bridge operations for the existing bridge. And this covers all of the operational activities related to the current Hood River Bridge. So this department receives all of the tolls to cover the expenses related to the running of the customer service, front desk, bookkeeping, IT, and toll booth activities are all expensed out of this department. Certain portions of the tolls are transferred to the general fund, bridge replacement fund, bridge repair fund, and new this year, the Bi-State Reserve Fund, and I'll touch base on that. The port is budgeting $6.3 million in current tolls that are not transferred to the new fund. And there are also minor costs or revenue for utility leases and interagency fees as well. As I mentioned earlier, there is plans underway to start a new toll increase based upon a recommendation from the Bi-State Working Group. And the intent of that is to start capitalizing a reserve fund for the new replacement bridge. But this year's budget will show a transfer of $3.6 million from the revenue fund to that new Bi-State Bridge Authority Fund to capitalize loans and activity of that new agency. Another big element this year out of the toll bridge department will be a significant software and hardware system to update the back of the house activities related to the BreezeBuy system. And just for I guess trivia, the tolls were last raised in 2018, and those were designated for repair and replacement. Switching then to the industrial buildings department. The industrial buildings department include the revenues and expenditures related to the following buildings. There's the Big 7 building, there's the Jensen building, Maritime, which is at the end of Fort Way, Halyard, the Timber Incubator up in Odell, Wasco, and the Lower Handle Mill properties are all run through this industrial buildings department. And the big news here, as I noted earlier, is that the port plans to pay off the remaining $1.6 million principal from the purchase of the Jensen property in 2009. This will relieve the port of an annual $158,000 dollar loan payment, which will help with the port's cash flow and work towards getting off that toll dependency. There are a number of projects this year for these properties, and the biggest one is a $400,000 replacement for replacing the elevator in the Big 7 building. And that's a relatively new discovery. As you know, when we had a vacancy within that building, we learned that the elevator is kind of a barrier to getting that area leased. And so staff is recommending that we do set some money aside in this budget to repair that budget. It has not been in operation for many, many years, but the prior tenant that was in there was not dependent on it. But we're learning through talking to the market that just because of this odd setup of that building, that elevator is going to be likely need to be replaced.
So did we know that it's been inoperable for a number of years?
Yeah.
It was
It's not a
decommissioned.
surprise.
Yeah, right, that's correct. It was decommissioned. Maybe 6 or 7 years before I,
Okay,
Came on.
and we're reactivating it because we think that's what the market is going for.
And the prior tenant that was in there did not need it. But we're finding that the market is looking for more movement from the main floor up to the second floor, and the location of the roll-up doors for the truck bay. And it's just a very oddly structured building, and this we think will help us market that building. Just continuing on here on some of the other capital projects, you'll see $80,000 for window replacements in the Jensen property, and a $250,000 set aside for wetland remediation up at the lower Annell Mill. The port also received a $50,000. Well, let's take that back. I guess it was actually $37,500 Oregon Business Grant to conduct a market analysis out there at the lower mill site, just to look at how we can best market or sell those properties moving into the future.
Can I stop you
Sure.
there on the that $250,000 for the wetland?
Yeah.
Is that a carryover project from last year?
Partial, yeah.
Because that's what you guys were working on,
That's
right?
correct.
And then we got caught by the winter and.
that's exactly right.
So how does it compare when you look at the total price? Is it an increase now?
Oh, no, we're hundreds of thousands of dollars in the plus. For doing this in-house. Literally. It was 600,000 something total. And I think we've spent under 150 so far.
Okay, and don't take this wrong. Were we planning last year to complete this work?
No, we knew we probably wouldn't get it completed before the winter hit us. We just got as far as we could before the winter got to us. And left it in a good state, so it would drain.
The other way to ask that is, when you budgeted last year, was it for all of the work? And we actually did get some of it, so we're carrying some.
It was actually budgeted to go up for contract, so we took it in-house. And yeah, there was $600,000 in last year's budget, of which we spent maybe 150,000. And the 250, I really highly doubt we'll use that whole 250, because the materials are already stored out there. The buying for that is pretty much done already.
Okay. How much do you really need this year?
You would have to ask Ryan that question.
He works for you,
What's that?
doesn't he work for you?
He's in charge of that project. He would be the one to ask about the funding, but when you're dealing with a wetlands, you never know what you're gonna come up against. And we could find a roadblock in there that we
Okay.
could spend that money.
Thank you.
You bet.
And just finishing up on the industrial buildings, there are some other capital repair placeholders as well. You'll see that throughout this budget, there will be like a number, but it's undescript as to what it is intended for. And so there are capital things that come up from time to time. And so we've got 20,000 additionally in the big seven, 20,000 in Halyard, 10,000 in the timber incubator, and 15,000 at Wasco. Moving into the commercial buildings department. So this is also within the revenue fund. This includes the revenues and expenditures related to the state DMV building. The Marina office building, which is where HNTB's office is located, and the building that we're in right now. There is a project to either study the relocation of the administrative offices, or that could actually be deployed as an architectural contract. Like, for instance, if it makes sense for us to start planning for the moving admin out of this building in anticipation of the bridge project. Perhaps it makes sense to take a look at the Marina office building and deploy an architect into redesigning that potentially for port admin to move over there.
So what is the $50,000 going to buy us, and where will we be at the end of the year?
So these are budget numbers where it's just a placeholder for if the commission wants to go and do a study and look at different places. That's certainly how you could deploy it, or if it makes sense that the Marina One office building makes the most amount of sense to just remodel it. That's a placeholder for the commission to determine which way it wants to go.
And do we already have that $50,000 grant? Has it been awarded?
Well, it's actually kind of through the bridge replacement project would be helping us
Okay.
with that.
So the answer today is no. Today is no, because this was originally intended to be part of the bigger grants. The estimate for the bridge was $520 million. A piece of that was to relocate this building someplace else. And there's allowance in there to do that. But we don't have really the funds yet to go spend a bunch of money doing this.
So what has time and inflation done to the bridge replacement project? What are we looking at a total then?
Right now, we're still looking at 520. Because we've seen that inflation is starting to come down,
All right.
but we're watching it pretty close. We have 4% in the estimate per year.
I think on that office building, if the bridge wants to pay for it, whatever, but if you want this commission to pay for it, I don't think. Hiring an architect and remodeling a building that you're gonna tear down in a couple of years. Makes me more sense than just sticking yourselves in the big seven for a couple of years. I mean, that we already have, so that's gonna be a tough sell for me.
Though I don't think that staff is recommending that the Marina One building would be torn down.
Oh, at some point, that entire area over there is gonna get redeveloped after the bridge is in.
Okay. So again, I think that 50,000 is really a placeholder for the commission to kind of say, hey, go look at Big Seven or look at Marina One. It's really an opportunity for you to deploy some resources to prepare for the moving of the administrative office.
So Kevin, from my point of view, I don't really have a problem with 50 grand. What I have a problem is, yes, it's a placeholder, but aspirationally, when you bring a budget to me, I want to say, okay, what are we gonna do? When is it gonna get done? And how much is it gonna cost?
Yeah.
Even on a yearly budget. So if admin wants to spend $50,000 to study what are we gonna do about this building, we gotta go someplace else. If the $50,000 by the end of the year gives us a recommendation that says, we think we ought to move this, not facility, but equivalent structure to Mosier. Ridiculous, but we'll have it, that recommendation by the end of the year. I'm cool with that, but all I see here is kind of a topic, here's some money. We'll let you know. That doesn't feel right. It's like, what do you guys want to do? And when do you want to get it done?
Well,
My,
Well, maybe we could get some direction from commission then, because that's, we don't, I mean. We have not heard from you what you want us to do, so.
I think there was
This-
three ideas just today.
Got you.
Kind of off guard a little bit, so.
Use that money to. We're going to have to do some kind of study on that area when the bridge is over. We've already told you it makes sense for. For offices, perhaps not facilities, but that's more up to facilities, but office to be close to. The port. You can use that placeholder to study what the greatest best use of that area is over there. That's not gonna come back as remodeling a crummy old building just for port. But if you put it out to market, I bet you there will be some ideas for development there that the port can be like, well, we're gonna be in this development. And then, take it to the market and maybe have somebody else pay for some of this and not the Port of Hood River, which is the way we need to be looking at things.
so
But you could use that placeholder to move forward on that kind of project.
see, I think we're talking two subjects here. One subject is strategically, what do we want to do with that whole area down there, once the bridge is done? Got it. Second issue, what I was kind of focused in on, we know we're gonna have to relocate, get rid of this building, but relocate staff. To me, we've got to ask Mike and HNTB and the project, when does this building have to be vacated? That then forces us to work backwards. It says, we gotta figure out, what are we gonna do? By what date? And this $50,000 is what we think it's gonna cost us to do that evaluation and come up with a recommendation.
And that's that October 26th is really when you're gonna potentially be mobilized.
Yeah.
October 26th
Yeah, it'll
is
be before
way
then.
too late.
It depends on where you want it. Depends on where you would want to put the contractor and the design team when they come in. If you want to house them here or somewhere here and lease this area to them, then the port will need to be out by the time that contractor comes on board, so they could lease this facility from you. If that was something you wanted to do, if you want them to go find something somewhere else in the community, they can go find somewhere else to house their staff.
Yeah, Mike,
But
that's
when
a
they
good,
come on board, potentially let's say next spring. Then they'll need somewhere to set up shop and bring in their designers, whoever they're gonna bring in. That could be here and they could lease this facility from you. But then the port's gotta be out of here by the time that happens.
but I think there's another piece of this that we're not talking about, is that once we do that design build contractor and we start targeting that we want to see some movement in 25, the first thing they're gonna do is probably set up their staging areas and their work wharfs. To do that, this place has got to be gone, or you got to be able to work around it, so you don't want staff in here.
Correct.
That means to me that we have to have this facility gone or not occupied by 25.
Yeah,
That gives you flexibility to move around and on the contract. So I think we got a plan that by early 25, this building's got to be gone, which basically means by the end of 24, you're in a new facility.
That's unrealistic on timeframe.
or it could be even sooner, like I said, if you.
That's the direction right there. Figure out the short term and long term for the port.
Okay,
Okay.
okay,
It's almost like two fifty candles.
let's keep going.
I'll ask one
Yeah.
And hope you get your
For the record. So noted.
Draw a line on there for me to tell me across from east to west where the bridge doesn't affect the ground anymore. Okay, could you do that, Mike? It's gonna take, you're gonna be docking stuff in the marina?
More than likely, there's gonna be a wharf that goes out here.
Okay.
The bridge is gonna be coming in this way. One scenario is all of this land down here. And probably this out here could very well be laydown area for a new bridge. Sure. So you're gonna have to move these facilities, get them out. Because you're gonna be bringing stuff in, storing it here, running it down here. Either put it on a barge, take it out, or you're gonna walk it right on across. So this whole area down through here, I think we're gonna have to vacate.
Okay, I didn't-
Now,
didn't
that
read
may
where
or
your
may
line-
not mean that we gotta do something with this building. Because of access into the parking lot. You really don't want heavy equipment moving around where you have civilian cars.
So once you get out of here, until you get the bridge built, you really don't have anywhere on this area right here. To
Well-
put another building of any.
Well, once the bridge is built, all of this, the new bridge has to put this back into a similar condition. So personally, and it's up to the port what they want to do with it. But I could see, repaving this boat ramp down here, this area over here, turn it into a green space. Put lawn out there. Personally, I'd like to see a restaurant out there. It's a beautiful spot, but I think for about 6 to 8 years, this is gonna be kind of off limits.
Okay,
And Ben is right, this whole area down through here, we want to think about on the port side. What do we want it to look like in the future and how do we want to use it?
So maybe they can start doing that with some of these budget items. So we need to move on.
Okay, moving along to the waterfront industrial department. So the waterfront industrial department includes revenue and expenses related to the port's paid parking program and the development of lots 1 and 900. This area has been studied profusely over the years, which is why it typically runs in the red. It's not generating much revenue outside of the paid parking. The paid parking program will see an increase in revenue due to an expansion in the program. It should be noted that the street side paid parking activities across all port properties are accounted for in this department at this time. Small amount of revenue is generated through truck trailer parking program at the west end of Portway for transloading, but the port is actively looking for other locations for that activity. There is a significant project planned for this next fiscal year. The port will be looking at engineering traffic improvements, some traffic analysis along North 2nd Street. The cost for engineering and partial construction in this budget's 1.1, but the port has received 2 $500,000 grants to accommodate the engineering and some of the construction. But this time we don't really know. We've got a cost estimate for some elements of the development of Anchorway and First Street, but there is also the potential to look at a roundabout at that intersection. And so we're not really sure which way to go, but we need to get the engineering team selected here shortly so that we can start exploring that with them. Staff is pursuing additional grant applications with EDA, ODOT, and Oregon Business, but the results of those applications are unknown at this time. And the thought is that the traffic improvements that we're talking about will increase the value of Lot 1 and Lot 900 upon completion. Moving to the waterfront recreation department, the port's waterfront assets are incredibly popular by both residents and visitors alike. The port's parks include the Yvette site, the Hook, the Spit, Nichols Basin, and Marina Park. Parks are not typically a enterprise function. It says they are governmental functions because they don't generate a lot of operational revenue on their own. They tend to rely on property tax, of which we don't have a whole lot. So tolls in the past have covered the negative net income run through our parks. There's a huge amount of labor that goes into maintaining the bathrooms and the landscaping and getting rid of the garbage for these large events that come into Hood River. It has been difficult, however, to hire people to do these jobs over the course of the last year. And so there has been a realized lower level of service due to the hiring difficulties that not just the port has experienced, but a lot of local governments. So the budget takes into account an increase in operating revenue due to introducing increased fees for the event site and the seasonal parking passes. In addition, the port will close the event site parking booth where the kids have worked in the summer, and that will save some money as well as we look to get off the toll revenues. It should be noted that the street paid parking is accounted for in the waterfront industrial department, not in the waterfront recreation department, just so that everybody understands that. There is some money set aside for capital repairs. 20,000 of that's unrealized. It's for cover tree replacement if we can get an equal grant to cover that. But there's always things that come up related to the water system, restrooms, other things that just are unforeseen at this time. So I'll just make the closing comment that in the short term, the port will need to find additional funding sources to make up for the loss of tolls being used to cover park expenses. One example would be working with other local governments that own and maintain parks and look at operating levies, trying to find out, there's going to, with the closure of the waterfront urban renewal district, that's going to put about $250,000 back into the city's general fund. Is there the possibility of working out a deal with the city that maybe some of that can help backstop the cost of maintaining the parks on the waterfront? So it's going to be those types of relationships and trying to figure out if there's other ways to generate, because I think in the 22 audit, it was as much as $325,000 that we'll need to make up the difference on.
To what degree is the city aware of the mismatch between revenue and maintenance costs for this?
I believe Mayor Blackburn, who's the relatively new mayor, has served on the bi-state working group, and this has been an issue that has been in front of them. And so in conversations with the city manager, she had indicated that Mayor Blackburn was aware of this pending deficit that's coming at us. And so he's open to exploring some of these ideas. There's no details as far as how much or how it's going to work. And Chair Shepherd, myself are going to be planning a meeting with the mayor and the city manager, hopefully the next 7 to 10 days.
Okay, well, so Kevin, it turns out that everybody in the county uses that as well as half the people in Portland. So you get part of your money from Portlanders and from some of the people down here that get down here late. But other than that, I don't see us doing anything except chunking out money. And like you say, it's 3.25 or so a year, which is a huge amount just for us to blow every year without having participation from the other folks that are certainly getting the advantages of having that down there. Now, as far as I'm concerned, it ought to be a three-way split, about 33 between the port and the city and the county. And I think you ought to start ringing that bell pretty darn hard, because otherwise you go ahead and put a across there where it gets to the port property, and if you from the city of Hood River or in the county and you guys aren't paying, but you don't get to be down here. We'll just let everybody from Portland show up. But it bugs me no end to have the city sit there making money hand over fist off of a project that you got here. And the reason I'm saying that is because we got a wham out here, a museum that has more than 40,000 people a year show up. A lot of them come here on purpose to see that. But the city of Hood River, and the port and the county, none of them say, gee whiz, you guys, what can we do for you? Because you have all those people that show up here and spend their money here and buy lunches here and stay overnight here and do all the stuff they're doing. Okay, so that's two areas, that one and out here. So I'm not gonna argue about the one out back there because we can support ourselves, but that 325 is nonsense. That's not getting split with the county and the city. Period. And I just charge it, write it up, and send them a bill for it.
I think this is one of the problems too, though. People don't understand what the port has paid down here. I mean, I was just talking to people yesterday, or at dinner and talking about what it is. And I don't know if we need to write, I mean, they don't have a clue what's going on. Is somebody pretty good about writing a story about what's happening and this bridge is happening and we're gonna lose the funding for what we have? I mean, nobody knows that, but it's like they think it just happens. And you think about what the port does, but the port pays for that, the port is paying for the parks, other places that are the park and recreation or something else. But I think people do not understand. It's kind of like when we raised the bridge tolls, you gotta explain, where's the money going? And I honestly think the general public do not have a clue, and I don't know how you get that across to people.
Yeah, Kevin, I think until the city and potentially the county also have a date to focus on so that they know they have to come up with a solution that doesn't involve bridge revenues. And I think they're gonna fund like they have for years when they thought we were flush with money. If we're gonna implement this policy where we don't use any bridge revenues for any kind of operational stuff that's not bridge related, they have to know that, and they have to understand that there's a fixed date and time when it'll be over, and they have to come up with a solution. This is really not us that should be made a solution. They should be doing it. It's their public facility that their citizens and ratepayers are using. So what the central bridge function.
Well, Genevieve, I know you're working on.
Newsletter's coming
a whole
out in about
series
2
of
weeks.
And that in conjunction with the bridge, there's a whole series of articles coming out, videos and open houses and all that kind of stuff. But to answer your question, the date is no now. It's July 30th, 2026. That revenue stream stops.
No, I understand that too.
Yeah, and that's gonna be in the news
They
articles.
totally appreciate that that's serious. That's the question, because in the past they haven't.
Well, we did have a meeting, like a joint meeting with the bi-state group, which included the county commissioner and the mayor. At that meeting, it was stated by the mayor that maybe the port just closes some of its facilities and people deal. And I think we can all say that that's probably the worst option, because
I wasn't serious.
it's hopefully not, because I think we can all say that this whole entire community benefits from the amenities that the port provides. So maybe it's the start of the conversation.
So going back to the budget, a couple of global questions that I know you've got that we haven't talked about is, one is what's your assumed inflation rate on your wages that you've built into the budget? Two is what kind of absenteeism do you have now, and you've built a budget that you're going to be able to staff all of these organizations. So right now is what's your vacancy rate? And the third one is you've got money in here that's tied up for salaries and so on, but it's really undefined for potential bonus or whatever. How much is that and what's your plan associated with that? So those three things have a big impact on the budget.
Absolutely. And we'll be working on that once we get through. I mean, we don't have those plans for each of those items identified.
Yeah.
yet.
No, I understand that, but I think the question on the table now is, what did you assume that
Oh, for 8%.
8% raise for everybody across the board? And that's tied to what?
CPI.
CPI.
Yeah, Western.
Yeah, the Western Small City CPI for January 22 versus January 23. It was 8.15%.
Okay, so that's a pretty healthy change. I would question whether the local businesses are raising their wages by 8-point-something%. So that's a question. To me, for the budget.
Well, I would say that I did see a job opening for Clickitat PUD, and for summer labor. High school labor, it was starting at $27 an hour.
So that's our competition.
Like I said, like the gym at Waste Management, $35 an hour and can't get employees with benefits. Wow, we talked to him last week about that. $35 an hour.
We don't just cover those expenses without increasing revenue.
So the other question is, how much vacancy do you have right now? And this assumes that you're gonna fill all of those staff positions.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so what's your vacancy right now?
Yeah, we have 3 in facilities, full-time, we are down right now. And we are down 6 in 6 to 7 in facilities. Although we have had a pretty good. We did a really big recruiting effort the last month and a half. And I'm pretty sure we're gonna be able to fill those summer positions. We are, however, holding off on going after full-time because. What we will get for what we're paying right now is summer help. So until we can be competitive and take good employees from other employers, we aren't gonna get them in the upper. That's just not going to happen. You could, as Hobie was saying, you could offer $40 an hour right now and you're still gonna struggle to fill those positions.
It's more about like, what's the experience, especially younger workers are looking for a positive experience, almost more than what's the retirement program. You know, and so a lot of the work that John and others have done is really talk about what an interesting place it is to work at the port. You get to be on the water and really talking up the other amenities of the port. And we actually tend to get a bigger response to that than, oh, and by the way, we have a retirement program that if you get vested in, you can be part of.
And if you make it that long.
Yeah, but it's just an interesting way that people are looking at things.
So is there any other vacancies other than,
There's 1.5 FTE for parking enforcement is also currently vacant. We're gonna be hiring for that next year.
so what's that add up, about 15?
Full and part-time mix, not
Right.
15 FTEs, but
Right.
15 people.
And then the third piece to this thing is, what do you have set aside? I know what the answer is, but these people need to know it. For some kind of a potential bonus program.
And it's $123,000, which is roughly 5% of the salary budget.
To me, I think that's reasonable, 5%. We gotta decide what the program's gonna look like, but 5% is not out of line. With the rest of the industry.
Those are merit increases, not really a bonus per se.
No, well, it's money. We've had some discussions about ways to encourage people to apply. We've talked about signing bonuses, which local government cannot do currently. But we've talked about a number of different ways of getting people to apply or to enhance, you know, if they're doing a really good job, some kind of an incentive type bonus. So it's money set aside to fund things like that, but we haven't actually identified what those exactly are.
The facilities department is working on a certificate program right now. That we're building that will give even our summer help a certificate for doing even some of the basic stuff that'll help them go get their next job. Which uses those skills, so they're gonna leave here with something more than just a summer of experience, you're gonna leave. With some paperwork based on how ambitious they are, that would give them a bunch of certifications. Full-time staff will have certifications that will get them all the way up to the top level, which is bridge operator. So Ryan and I have been working on that for about 2 months now, trying to put together a certificate program that would be, you know, used in that as well.
So the training for this, some of it's self-taught, self-study.
That's correct.
You expect them to do some of it offline?
We
outside of
expect
work?
a lot of it'll be hand, you know, like tool hand use. You know, small engine, small equipment operation, medium equipment operation, large equipment operation, just various steps that'll apply to everybody from summer help all the way through. And yes, our guys will have those, we'll get those certificates because they're capable of all that work.
Where I'm
So-
going with this is if we're paying them to do the training, that's one thing. If we're also seeing that they're taking it on their own to after hours to study and develop themselves. And I think that's a perfect case for using some of this bonus money once they complete it, give an award. Especially if there's that mix.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Let's see, any other questions then on the waterfront recreation? Hearing none, moving on to the marina department. And so we are seeing an increase in revenue primarily driven by mortgage rate increases. And a small $20,000 grant, which is basically funding from the bridge replacement effort to kind of look at the section 6F and some of the other impacts that the bridge will have on the project for this whole area. And Commissioner Fox, you touched on those.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely cool with the 6 seconds, but we gotta be very careful. If we let that expand and creep, especially if we're going after federal funding. There's some very strict rules we're gonna have to live with. And if they catch us going outside that boundary, that could put us in jeopardy.
Well, we
So
certainly
we gotta be very careful when we're talking about that.
Kevin, let me make a suggestion.
Yeah.
Let's just get through this and then go back for questions on it.
Okay, that's fine. Let's see, the first, there's also a first of 3 phases of the North Sea Dock is being budgeted to be replaced. Earlier in 2010, 2013, the port entered into 2 financing agreements to finance the expansion of the port's marina. And there is a loan payment of 95.5 also included in this year's budget. And overall, the marina has a positive net operating income and is able to accommodate some capital projects through its net operating income. Not huge, but it's enough to do a little bit of work there. On the airport department, though the airport has struggled to break even over the years, there are several opportunities for increased revenue generation. The North Apron space is ready for a tenant. The port acquired the old SDS hangar. And there is flexible FAA funding that could be used to offset costs in building a South Apron row of T hangars. The commission feels that the potential is there to generate new revenue within 3 years to help the airport gain sustainability. So there are some capital projects out here. There's $30,000 to complete some wetland improvements on the North Apron. There's $75,000 project for engineering related to the anemometer relocation, which is the windsock. There are pretty significant grants, almost 99% grants to offset that. There's also a placeholder, $60,000 for the repair to that SDS hangar, if they're needed to get a tenant in there. And then also we're budgeting $100,000 for preliminary design for a new bank of T hangars, which includes about half in FAA grants. Just to note that the anemometer, that 75,000 is just for the engineering. To actually acquire the equipment, install it is closer to 160. And that'll be in a subsequent budget. In the
Isn't there, does the feds do not pay the airports, the little airports, isn't there a certain amount of money that is not a grant that comes because of all the gas money that's separated between airports? Does this airport not receive money from the feds to help run it? I mean, if it is, I can't find anything in any budget that is. And I thought airports received a certain amount of money from the feds, and that's from the gas tax.
that is, I have not heard that.
It used to be, but I don't know where that stopped if it doesn't, because, I mean, this is a prime example. It used to be there was money that came, because there's a big tax on, that's federal, not state. I know it gets state because they come around and do crack ceiling and they do their little funding, and that's, that's okay. But there used to be a federal little airports, because that little airport shouldn't be paid for by the port. It's a service to the community, the whole area, because fire, because emergency, because of the ambulances that come in and out. People come, the businesses, it's like, not everybody pays for the freeway. It's like the airport. That shouldn't be paid for by the port. That should be paid for. I mean, I'm just saying in theory, I thought there was a federal money came from the general funds for keeping little airports. Portland gets it, why, Portland gets it, and I can look into this a little more.
Please do, yeah,
Because
that's.
it used to be, we got some at McMinnville Airport, when I was airport manager there for years, we used to get a certain amount, I mean, it was like $150,000 a year from the feds for keeping our airport open for emergencies and, but it had to do with gas money distributed to all the airports. And it didn't count up on our gas, they took it and split it out, it wasn't like, we didn't sell enough gallons to get it, it was, anyway, I will do some. And it's been
Yeah.
like 10 years ago, so I will do, but there's nothing here that shows it ever did. I always thought there was. Nothing.
We'll look into that.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with you on
Okay.
that. I'm curious too.
Okay.
Continuing on in the administration department, the administration department is very similar to the general fund. It includes placeholders for employee incentives, as we discussed earlier, unallocated expenses and general travel expenses and reimbursements. There are no FTEs accounted for in this department. There is a $200,000 revenue placeholder if there is intergovernmental agreements related to contracted administrative services to the new bridge authority. There is no executed contract at this time, but that's just a placeholder if that comes to fruition. The port is also in the process of procuring new financial software that will provide improved fund accounting, reporting, and management tools. So staff is budgeting $250,000 for that software. Hopefully it won't be that much. There's also another $34,000 for other computer IT upgrades to prepare for separate compliance requirements that are coming down the pipe starting in 2025. So we're going to start phasing that in. In talking with the finance director, this may be the last year that this budget committee will see this department, as we may be organizing the funds in the departments to include an internal services fund to take care of some of these administrative functions of the port. The last department within the revenue fund is the maintenance department, and this is also a zero personnel expense department. It includes contracts, machinery maintenance, insurance, and equipment purchases that are used throughout port properties. The port does have $100,000 in this department to fund the purchase of 2 trucks and a large deck mower. In addition, the port is, this is where we're putting the contract for the night security would be placed in this maintenance department. So that is the summary of the revenue fund. Moving along is,
Are there any questions on the revenue fund?
Yeah, just one question for John on the $100,000 for trucks and a deck. How is the rest of your equipment fleet? Are we on a recurring replacement?
We are.
We're okay?
We are.
Or have we been keeping it down and we're gonna get hit with it here and?
No, luckily, Fred started developing a program for vehicle replacement. And we've gotten rid of all of our really old ones, and we are on a cycle now of we buy a new one. And other than the last 2 years, we kept a couple because they were being used for parking and that kind of thing. Otherwise, those would have gone out to auction already.
okay, the bridge repair fund. So the bridge repair fund was created to accommodate for increasingly expensive capital maintenance projects related to the current bridge. You've probably heard some of these numbers before, but the bridge capital improvement plan includes $90 million in repairs over the next 15 years. It is funded by transfers from the revenue fund. And this year the transfer is just over 1 million. And those transfers come from the 94, 2012, 2018 toll increases. And the budget for capital projects this year is significant, over 3.5 million. Those projects include the wire rope replacement, underwater pier cap repairs, miscellaneous steel repairs. Maintenance painting is extremely expensive. That's spot painting. That's very isolated spot painting. Rack and pinion shaft repairs, and then an annual placeholder for deck welding. In addition to capital contracts, there are expenditures out of here related to flagging, the portion of port labor used for welding on the bridge, engineering and legal review of bridge repair contracts.
A question on grading. Have you seen any increase because we back up with the load rating? Are you seeing any increase that we need yet?
It's so funny that you mentioned that. We were out, we had the bridge incident the other day where the truck got stuck and then we had another one get right out next to it and it stalled right as it was going out around. Crazy circumstance, but while we were out there working, we were all saying, okay, we gotta get back to deck one. It was making a lot of noise. So, yeah, we're seeing, I think. We haven't done any welding for almost 2 years, so I think it's partly that we're just catching up with. You know, what's been going on for 2 years. I think it would be hard to pin that on heavier loads at this point when we haven't had to do any welding for 2 years. It was just steadily increasing.
So do you have, is there a line item here somewhere? I didn't see it for knocking out some of that welding this fall?
There is.
Okay.
That's in part that 60,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just as an aside. Like down here. Little spit that you're gonna maybe do something with some point in time. And you lunch once in a while, when we're doing that, I would watch that bridge or 15-mile-an-hour deal. Which I figured right, that's fine. But you watch that, and interestingly enough, there's always 1 out of 8 cars that says, gee whiz, that's what I'm gonna do, right? So that he's the first one, the other 8 cars are behind him. So you get these little trains of cars going across with the guy that's doing pretty close to what he's supposed to be doing for a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, which is like hiking in the woods, but it slows the whole gang down. So it's interesting to me. I mean, if there was any way for people to pass or whatever, then you'd have everybody going 40, the guy going 15. It's an interesting, if you just sit and watch those guys do it, it just goes over in spurts, and of course the lights have something to do with that to start with, but there's always somebody out there, maybe 4, 2 going each way, that are actually going 15 miles. They're pretty close to it, and then everybody just gets stacked up behind it. I know they're all personal, but it does end up slowing everybody down real nice.
You're exactly right.
It keeps 25 guys from now going 35.
We are averaging 25 miles per hour. Exactly as I said, if we said 15, we get 25. If we said 25, we get 35. So we're averaging 15 or 25 at all times right now, which is perfect. It's right where we want them to be.
Moving on to the Bridge Replacement Fund, this fund was created to accommodate activities related to the replacement of the Hood River Bridge. Most of the funding is from grants to cover the management contract, technical assistance agreements with the state agencies and other contracts. Since 2017, the port has received $20 million from 4 different grant sources to cover management expenses for the NEPA process and the startup of the construction project. New grants for this project will be received by the new Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority and not the Port of Hood River. So really this 20 million is really the last of the bridge contracts that the port will be receiving.
I don't know if that's true, Kevin. And the reason why I say that, the new authority stands up July 1st.
Yeah.
They're not gonna have the accounting ability with accounts set up at banks to receive funding into it.
So it's for that 15 million from Washington State. So we're hoping that the Bridge Authority will be up and ready to receive that funds. Certainly, if it makes sense for the port to accommodate that, we want to help. But it seems like it would be cleaner if it
would be
was
cleaner.
on the
I don't
Bridge
know
Authority.
if the new administration can handle that way.
Is there a problem in having the grant administration being done by the port that's been doing that kind of thing for years?
No, there's gonna be an interagency agreement set up and the new entity will pay costs that are incurred by the port to administer. That's fine. Just gotta get that set up.
Okay.
They'll have their own bank account and their own checks, even their own, software, but likely the port staff will be doing that work for the foreseeable interim future. Let's see here. So just a note, then the new grants mentioned that this year the port will be using grant funding from Oregon, House Bill 5006. $1 million worth, Washington Senate Bill 5165, 2.6 million, and most of the bill in 2020. Those are placeholder amounts as we progress with the RFP process for the Progressive Design Build contract. There is a transfer from the revenue fund to cover non-grant reimbursable expenses, primarily driven by the lobbying expenses that we talked about earlier. And also the Build 2020 grant has a requirement, if you recall, that there's a 1.25 match from the port to that. We're currently working with them to allow the Washington funds to be that match, but if that doesn't come through, we still need to account for that 20% of towards the Build grant. So if there's any other questions or comments, or Mike, if you have anything you want to add to that?
Nope, nothing at this time, unless there's questions.
Moving along, we're almost done here. The new fund, there is a new fund, and this is the Bi-State Bridge Replacement Fund. This new fund was created to set aside an anticipated toll increase to fund the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority. A requirement of the TIFIA loan program is that the new bridge authority will have enough funding accumulated to cover reserves for $100 million loan, give or take. And so this fund will allow those reserves to accumulate until they are needed. And I put 2029. I don't know if that's the exact date, but that's the point being is that they need to start accumulating.
Yeah, there's two pieces. 2028 and then when the bridge opens.
Gotcha. So the port anticipates that all the funds from the toll increase, 3.6 million, will be transferred into that new fund. Yes.
Okay, so the port's got 15 or 16 million bucks stuck away for the bridge north tower replacement. Whenever the bad guys run into it, do whatever it is, I think it's like what you could get by with having a reserve for as piece of the cost of that bridge out there for it to get damaged somehow. Okay, that's mine. We've got and some paperwork in that. And it was 16 to 15 to 16. They did kind of goes along that thing out for several years, and so where did that go?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I'm following you, John. So where are you? There's 15. Are you talking about like the port's total fund reserves?
Keeps a reserve for bridge replacement as an insurance. Or
Well, let me see if I understand.
you know,
We're going for a toll increase.
I'm not talking about total replacement. I'm talking about
Our existing reserves.
sitting around
Existing.
as a reserve.
It was a line item.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just the fund balance in the reserve.
Yeah, so our total reserves are about 15 million right now. The bridge repair fund runs, and it kind of fluctuates depending upon how much work is done and how much is earned, but and I'm estimating it's going to have about 5 million in it at the end of this fiscal year. So starting off this new budget, I'm estimating it'll have about 5 million in it.
Okay, I didn't see that we were gonna do anything with either of those that much on out for however far your chart went out. 29 or whatever. Okay, so to me, that's money that's sitting there that we're betting isn't gonna be used. So where does it end up? If you need 20 million bucks to do financing for this $125 million loan, you got 15 of it's in that fund.
We don't have 15, we have 5. But a lot of that's going to be spent on repairs this year. And into this bridge.
Oh, I see in 15.
I'm not sure. That's what we're.
What that is your total reserve that you have right now
Yeah,
for everything.
for everything.
And the intent is that reserve doesn't. Go back on.
Well, yeah, I mean, at the beginning of this fiscal year, we'll have about 15 million maybe a little, even a little more than that but that's for the whole port, not just for any bridge piece of it. That's for the whole port. And we're spending some of that down because we'll be paying off some debt and things like that and doing some pretty big capital projects this year.
So if you look on page 8, I guess maybe at this point, I'll close down my budget message. But I think we're gonna be getting into some of the issues that you're talking about next. Because Debbie's gonna kind of go through some of these charts, and there's a really good chart that addresses the fund balance.
Yeah, and I could talk forever, but I promise I won't. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go through and actually probably entertain some questions here instead of going through the budget in any more detail. You did an excellent job of doing my work for me. Thank you very much. So yeah, and I probably, well, I don't know if we, well, actually, if you want to bring up page 7 on there, so I'll make sure that we're looking at the same thing. So page 7 is the first chart. So in budget talk, we talk about resources and requirements because revenues is kind of a specific thing and it means new money coming in, and expenditures is kind of a specific thing that talks about money going out. But in reality, we have a certain amount of money that is going to be the port's resources, and we can spend that money or save that money or do whatever, but how we plan it is the requirement. So in budget speak, we have resources and requirements. So on page 7, we have the resources graph, which shows a beginning fund balance this year of about 17 million, but a big chunk of that is because we didn't get all of our capital projects done this year. Things like the wire ropes and I think wasn't the underwater stuff budgeted for this year also. Things like that just didn't get done. So that's all moving into this next fiscal year. So that's why we have more money right now, is because we just didn't spend it on some of these big things. But this shows where all of our money comes from. So we have about 17 million that's basically cash in the bank at the beginning of the year. And then this is where we'll get some more money. We'll get some toll revenue and lease money, and all of that is shown coming in. And then if you flip over to the very next page, that's our requirements. And that shows what all we think we're going to spend during the year, but it also shows the ending fund balance of about 11 million. Now, there's also contingencies right below that on the left, and we typically do not spend our contingency. So I would bet that next year our ending fund balance will be about 12,163,000 because we typically don't spend contingencies. But you just like to have that so that it makes, you know, if something does come up, you've got some money you can draw from to cover anything that's really, really unexpected. We try to budget for minor unexpected, like Kevin talked about the placeholders for our industrial buildings. That's for things like if you start to have an HVAC system problem or something like that, you've got some money set aside for those kinds of things. If something happens and the building falls down, that's where we would be like looking to, okay, you know, where do we go from here? And some of this other mitigation would kick in at that point. So that one shows we have personnel services, which include salaries and benefits, and also includes the money set aside for incentives and things like that. So that's that 3.6 million. And it has the materials and services. You see the really big capital outlay of 15.6 million, which also includes the bridge replacement piece of it, which I believe is about 8.9 million out of that 15. The rest of the 15 is just the rest of the port, things that are going to hopefully get done for the rest of the port. So that's basically our revenue or our resources and requirements. So John, did any of that jump out at you as what your original question had?
No, I just looking at the buffalo over here in the corner.
Oh, the big
The state group, which, you know, I hear about a lot of time. I've only seen one representative from that organization. But they make a lot of decisions. A lot of money goes one place or another because they're in Philadelphia about 5 years in advance and a whole bunch of things going on. I just don't want us to get in a position where a whole bunch of money that these folks behind me up here on the ridge that are paying bridge tolls that get doubled again are paying. And nobody else is. Now, if you wanna have 50 million bucks in your hand, and you wanna charge the taxpayer in Oregon for it, you know what that amounts to per taxpayer? $18. Okay, so if you want 20 million is, $7 each. So what we got is our 50,000 or so people in our back and forth across the bridge regularly because of work, because of their zone. Are gonna be paying several $100s each to do something that nobody else in the bridge does that except ours. This don't like the idea that we're taking that on this. There's no end to it. Until we either pay for the bridge and quit charging toll, or whatever, but I'm not. It just is, it seems. Like the wrong way to not have some sort of backup. Showing me anything about that in the way of what we do, what we get. What we're paying for. I mean, this is a
What do you mean?
$100 million deal. We're doing this as citizens of the bridge of River now. We're footing about. What is it, $20 million worth of work? Part of it's ours, and much of it's somebody else's. Right here, but it's not. Doing anything but hammering the bridge toll posts. The people that are paying the toll. Unduly, as far as I'm concerned. I just want to say that out loud. Put a new bridge in if you want to, but the people that are in the river didn't say, people, we want a new bridge, but we want to pay $8 for the next 40 years for it. And that's what you're gonna get. Now, if there's some way to mitigate that, by not having people pay a whole bunch of money up front for a loan guarantee, then that's one thing if you get your money back, but it doesn't look to me like that just going into a pot. Which I know people are religious, and that's what's gonna happen. And I just see it disappearing into the sunset, which happens regularly with funding from government projects. So, there you go.
Well, John, I'd be happy to sit and talk to you all day long about this. And I don't think it's our intent to snowball anybody for the new bridge. We, the toll takers or toll payers are gonna have to pay for a chunk of that bridge. And that assumes we get $450 million from the states and the feds. We don't get that, that means the tolls are gonna have to go up even more. So it kind of comes down to, do you want a bridge or do you not?
What's the increase in toll?
There's gonna be
We talk.
there's actually gonna be an open house. When is it?
It's the 31st on Washington and the 6th. 7th in Oregon.
June 7th in Oregon. And just to tack on to what John's saying, it was basically what he's asking is, why is this not a state bridge? And we get that question all the time, and it's a completely legit question. Why do we have to pay for this bridge ourselves? And the fact of the matter is, in Oregon and Washington, even if it were a state-owned bridge, it would likely be tolled. So the fact that we have a locally elected body governing the setting of the toll rates is actually a distinct benefit for us over most of the communities in the two states when it comes to tolling. The decision makers will be local people that set the tolls, and that has always been the case. But I get, we get asked that all the time. Why is it not an ODOT bridge? Why is it not a WashDOT bridge that's paid for with gas tax and property tax and whatnot? And it's a completely legitimate question, but it wouldn't necessarily eliminate the tolling part of the funding package.
No, actually, the bridge goes up, people pay toll for it, they've been doing a lot of bridges up down here.
Yeah.
Down the bridge to 97 for years and years, as soon as the bridge is paid for, generally the toll goes away.
Right.
Whichever state's responsible for it ends up picking that up, it's a state job,
Well,
not the county,
for-
look at that
For
job.
whatever reason, John, the port years ago decided not to go that way.
Well, no, I know they're not doing it now, who's gonna own the new bridge?
This new authority, and that's because we can't get the two states to own it. Now, there's a suggestion behind the scenes. Fine, we'll go ahead and get the bridge built. And then we'll see if one of the states will take it. We'll give it to them. And then maybe the tolls go away because they've got this big capital new project. But if you want a new bridge, we're gonna have to build it ourselves, or we'll never see it in our lifetime.
Yeah, if I was fishing in that stream, I wouldn't be calling my wife for salmon for dinner, that's for sure. All right, there's an awful lot. it's not gonna be a private entity doing it
Well,
at this point.
the way it's set up, it's like the port, it's a governmental body. But it's on both sides of the bridge. You know, it's Oregon and Washington. But long-term, I know one commissioner that if I had my way, we would have either Oregon or Washington take it over once we're done with it. You know? We don't need a long-term bridge. Let them do it.
Need two of them, that's for sure.
So the limit is that we have got a total cost of the bridge construction through completion, relocation costs and all that. We've got a certain amount of capital we're gonna be able to bring to it, and there's a gap. Gap has to be filled, and it's to be filled with debt. And the debt has to be retired, and you don't get a lot of flexibility in what you're gonna charge, because you need a certain amount of revenue. So unless there's free money.
But we're setting strategies that try and minimize
Right.
that number. It'll be getting into way too much detail. You get a TIFIA loan, a line of credit, and that's the last money we'll use.
What's happening to the old bridge?
The new authority is gonna have to remove the old bridge and pay for it. So part of the $520 million, and it's about $40 million, is to take the old bridge out. Including the foundations.
Let's tip over the thing. You can't beat that.
If you wanna go screaming off in the night, come talk to me about that.
It's pretty heavy to move. Okay.
So what I would like to do, and I think the commissioners will be fine with this, unless there's something specifically you want me to do, is to answer questions at this point. Yeah, so were there other questions that came up about the budget as people went through it? Questions about even a specific number or
I've
something?
got several small ones.
Okay.
But, go ahead.
Oh, I just have a small one also, the utilities,
And they are all page numbered, so please give me a
on
page.
page 9,
Okay. Uh-huh,
utilities. That.
that's for this building, but we actually end up including that in allocations. I wasn't really clear on that. Actually, when I prepared the budget, I was kind of just following what Fred had done in some cases, and then I went back and I looked and I went, that doesn't really make sense. So I'm not sure why that $1,000 was put in there.
For utilities for the year for the court office. building?
Yeah, and they're more than that, so I'm not sure why, I'm
I
not
would
sure
think it
where
would
that
be
number actually came from.
Significantly more than.
Yeah, so I'm not.
Is it
I'm
for
not
the
sure.
shops and the court office or just the court office?
I think it's just supposed to be for the court office, but those
Okay,
get
so-
allocated out to the departments that pay for
Okay,
the overhead, because this building is overhead, technically to the
because
port.
I just saw this month's, this October bills.
Yeah.
$20,000.
But that was,
That for
that's for everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our bill for all of our buildings,
Right.
was 20,000 something, yeah.
And the court office was. This is only 64.
Yeah, because that's just the gas bill.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that is the whole entire port for 20,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing, same page, if you look at the blue line. Total general government administration.
Mhm.
What I look at is 22-23. Adopted budget was 672. 950. And it's going to 398,550.
And the biggest chunk of that was the advocacy that got moved out of the general fund and into the bridge replacement. That's the biggest single number that came out of there.
So other than that, they would be pretty close.
They'd be pretty close. There was something in the budget last year for something called a financial model. It was like $65,000 for a financial model. And I didn't know what that was for, and we haven't been directed to do any financial modeling, and so I took that
Oh, I know.
65,000 out of last year.
Back then, we talked about redoing the 10-year plan.
Oh, and having a professional
Have a
company.
real model put together.
Okay.
that You could do what ifs on.
All right. Well, we can talk about that again in the future, but I took it out of this year's budget. We've got so much going on that I don't think that that's gonna happen this next year. So that, those would be the main things that came out of there.
I had a question on the dues and memberships.
Yes,
Now that we're needing to tighten our purse strings up a wee bit. I think that we really need to take a hard look at what entities and agencies we're giving money to and being a part of, and what is the direct benefit to the port. If there's not a direct benefit, I think we really need to consider stopping.
so
all
those,
of that.
those are detailed on page
Yes.
10.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. So that's, I'm, open to whatever you want to.
Mhm.
Let's go down the list. I mean, some of these special districts association, obviously, we need to. We're gonna be members of that.
Yeah,
Gorge Technology Alliance, what would we give them $600 for?
Gorge Technology Alliance, I believe, is a subset of McKenna.
Yeah, it's a subset of McCare that's like an annual membership. It's really a supportive,
For what?
yeah, for their,
Yeah. I know that we've been supportive of a lot of these entities and agencies in the past, and I just think we really have to.
scrutinize.
I'm just going on this waterways makes sense, public ports, okay. You should be in Rotary, that's a good thing. Energy Council, 10 grand.
and they actually asked for 20.
I'm wondering why that's $1. Why are we giving them money?
So I guess,
Some historical background.
well,
Oh, goodness.
I guess I was kind of thinking, so there is some solar panel. Potential up at the airport, and I guess the question is would we be leveraging that relationship with this program? So,
It's
yeah,
not gonna save you.
Not if we
much.
just-
A question on the solar panels, they have a huge reflecting, if you've ever been around or flying where they have these things.
Yeah, I don't think that.
I don't think you'd want them at the airport, that's gonna reflect right back on the colors somehow, I mean, it's amazing how they reflect. And they'll even warn you on some of the highways down in Arizona where, be careful when the sun, because of the reflection that can happen, it really is blinding. And when I heard that at the airport, why, we only had that much space, if we had 100 acres of empty space, but we're sitting there tight.
I think
Anyway, that's fine.
I think we're looking at trying to do something on top of that.
I know, we've thought about Olam too, and all those buildings and all that stuff, they've got all that flat space and, but you look at anyway, that's my comment.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see other airports that maybe if they get it, don't have a problem, anyway,
Might be Pendleton you might want to contact,
yeah, they have theirs out in the field though.
down below, yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite a ways from, when you fly in there, it's not right at the airport, you don't see it. I mean, Hood River's tight, you think about any of those places, what are you gonna do when you're coming in and anyway, just a thought.
The city and county are doing 20 and 20 for what that's worth.
Right, but they have a large property income. I really like your pie graph here of our net property taxes, and you can't see the line.
You can't really see it. Yeah.
Line.
It's not a line.
Not a line.
So, I mean, if we had a healthy budget and we had a healthy income of something. But all of our income streams seem to be going away, and I personally feel like. It hurts, but we gotta look at these things really closely. I mean, do we wanna support our personnel services and, be able to have bonuses for our staff and for our. Continuing education for our team, or do we wanna give it to these other agencies and not have any control of how they spend it?
I can easily come up with $20,000 just in that section that I would much prefer to. Keep and put in facilities department or somewhere where we can use it here for us.
Mhm.
So suggestion, why don't we think about in total, cutting in half this time? And it's sending a signal, hey, we have to tighten our budgets here. But we're not gonna totally drop you off, but we're winning you down off of us, so 25,000 and then probably take it down to 10 the next year.
So, and you need to jump in here, though, a few of these are required,
Right.
really, for all intents
Well,
and purposes.
Yeah. Well, and I don't mind going that approach, take the required ones out of 25 grand, not out of 50, and then decide where else the rest should go.
Okay,
Could I just make a quick comment on the Energy Council one in particular? You know, when the city and the county and the port all together approved the energy master plan, which was aspirational goals, it was an entirely different port. And I think this is really a key part of the interagency communication that we're going to start having with this steep trajectory to be off tolls by June of 2026. That's part of that conversation is, you know, in the past, we wanted to, you know, participate on equal level with the city and the county, but as you just noted, Christy, we don't have that property tax revenue to be able to do that anymore. And this is all part of getting off those bridge tolls, and I think that those agencies would completely understand that that's the reality of our situation. You know, it's all in, you know, how we communicate.
Right.
That priority is going to touch really every part of the port, including the partnerships that we've had in the past that we had ample funding for.
You know, likewise on Pacific Northwest Waterway, this shows an increase. I think you gotta send them a signal, there's no increase and maybe a little bit of a cut. It can't be business as usual.
Exactly. Yeah.
So do we want to get rid of that? I think they just set what the dues and they are what they are, and you either are a member or you're not a member. So do you want to,
Pacific?
Yeah.
yeah, Pacific Northwest Waterways,
I think we need to think about, you know, I mean, I know we go to the conferences every year and what has been the direct benefit to our port by being a member of this association? I
Yeah.
understand it's a networking thing. I understand it's a, you know, we all play nice together and kumbaya. I think we can still do all of that stuff, but do we actually have to? Again, other ports generate money and have the luxury of being able to be a part of these associations. We don't have the luxury anymore.
You know, I went to a couple of them meetings and I can do too. I'm sorry, I didn't see a lot of benefit to us. I really didn't. Likewise, the same thing with the Energy Council. I mean, our mission is a lot different than theirs. And I don't see how they're really gonna.
Well, and then even in looking at kind of like their priority list. Port's not on that list for any priority projects this next year. I mean. We haven't submitted to them asks, you know, because we've kind of been busy. Restructuring, but you know, it's not any offense to any of these agencies. I think if we're gonna be saying we're not gonna be using bridge tolls, we need to really not use bridge tolls, and that's what I'd rather see some trash pickup at the event site.
So just, Greg, just refresh my memory. So the solar panel, assuming that that's the direction the commission wants to go, is there any benefit to that project by being part of this coalition on the energy side?
So just to clarify, that's through MPED, not through the Energy Council. So it's a different entity.
Well,
that
The
we're
Energy
talking
Council
about.
is part of it.
Well, yeah, Solarize Hood River, there are, I would assume our dues that we pay to Mid-Columbia Economic is where we get that benefit. I don't know that it's directly routed through the Energy Council as far as my communication with.
So like the grants or other things that would be offsetting our costs to those solar panels on the T hangers aren't necessarily because of our relationship with the energy.
I don't know with the Energy Council. I'm assuming it's through MCAD, but.
My understanding, the Energy Council will help you assess the need, write up some kind of report, and will help you identify grants. But it's all help, it's not due, it's not guaranteeing traction.
They have helped us with a couple lighting projects along the way though, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, some big, very expensive lighting projects. We almost solely,
Reimbursed.
our match was minimal in those projects. So they actually have helped us on some very large, you know, $100,000 plus projects,
But MCAD or the Energy?
the Energy Council.
Well, again, I can see dropping it by half. And taking a look at it in a year, and if we haven't found a gold mine, we gotta do a cost benefit analysis.
Well, if you drop some of that by half. People that think that they're getting burned a little bit will come back to you and say, well, gee whiz, why'd you do it? And you can say, gee whiz, what good were you doing for us? And maybe they'll encourage people to come up with the reasons why. The Port
Good point.
Island continue just like they're doing, instead of us having to dig around for lots of personnel time, having to do the same.
How did they come up with the 20,000? I mean, is that a percentage of compared to the other ones? Is
Oh, it's probably because 8% inflation. I'm guessing.
I think
They
I
asked for money last year.
They did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I was just wondering why, is there a group that does it, and we somewhere we committed to doing a third of it or a fifth of it or a percentage? I mean, that's what I was wondering.
yeah, and unfortunately Genevieve stepped out. 'cause
No, we didn't commit, I remember signing, we didn't commit to a percentage of any
No.
total
Okay.
at all.
And have we gotten any benefit this last year from dealing with them?
I don't know, did we?
No, not this far, but if just a couple of years ago, we got $100,000 benefit, then I would imagine 10 years of paying these dues would be
How many years ago was that? Like 3 years?
right as I came on, so it's probably
2
2
years,
years.
yeah, 2 years ago. And they've helped with a couple others, I just can't remember where right now. But,
So looking forward this year, next year, do you see any projects where we could use?
every one of our old buildings,
Well, once we start to build new, I mean, commissioners, I would just say as we start to redevelop a new port, we're gonna be looking for partnerships with other entities along the way. And so you might want to be judicious about how much you slash now, because we might put ourselves out on an island rather than have some of these entities that are willing to work with us to provide benefits. So don't disagree with looking at how we can cut, but we are gonna need partnerships moving forward. We've talked about different municipalities and needing to create those conditions.
I'd still cut it, and then if we find something that we could use them. Yeah, they're hungry now, they'll come back and let's make a deal. We can always add back up.
Well, it sounds like if you go into dealing with one organization, that's maybe have. A whole bunch of money getting this energy development. And that may not be very fun, and you can find some real nice outfit that you can deal with for some percentage of what you're doing, whether it's. Turns out people. Just that's all money into the box, that is something might have not.
So here's another option, John. If we took that $10,000 and we funded. A third, a quarter of a person. And their job is to go identify. And submit for grants. Would we get a better rate of return by going that way than?
I'm with you. If you could hire somebody.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of grant writers. It's just a matter of looking. In the right places.
But yeah, the key thing is identifying and then getting them ready.
Yeah, some of the doubt.
It costs more than 10,000.
a lot of the light replacement grants were coordinated through the Mid-Columbia Energy Council. The only way you could get those grants is working through them.
right. But what, I guess the question is, so if we aren't a financial partner with them, will they then not work with us at all if we go to them and
I
request?
don't know the answer to that.
I was gonna ask, it's not like a subscription fee, it's.
That I don't know. I just know that all the grants had to funnel through them.
Mhm.
And they did all the work too. We
Does
signed,
that
we
have
just,
to funnel to them, or
yeah, I
their
believe it does, yeah.
services
I
is-
believe it does. Yeah, they coordinate with all the various energy companies that provide those rebates and grants.
Sure.
And so the energy companies flow the money into them and then they get projects that they spread out.
Cause reading through the information, it just sounded like, what, their service assisted with the grant funding, or.
They actually do it.
Identify.
They do it. We don't have to manage those grants at all, which is
Yeah, I
great.
didn't say that you have
The G block.
Yeah,
my impression, John, was that they're a clearinghouse. They have some folks that know where grants are. You don't have to go through them. It's just an easier way to get access to
Mhm.
this. Could you go that way? I believe you can. So it really depends on how many grants are you going after and how many do you need to make up the $10,000?
We don't have management staff here to
Right.
manage that many grants. That's just, that, we just don't have that. That's just not going to happen here, at least not well.
Well, so if you think down the road. And the way we're having to retool the port because we're losing the bridge. And all of our projects are gonna have a percentage of grants to help fund them, the big ones. Then maybe it makes sense that we invest some of our money that we do have. Into developing that capability here locally. Even though we don't have them now, maybe that's a problem. Maybe we need to fix that. But I think that's a discussion strategically we ought to be talking about.
Let's look a little higher level
Yeah.
here. What we're looking for is places to save money. We can kind of not do it this year, then you're gonna bring us a budget next year, and you're not gonna have a choice, and it's gonna be drastic. So I think over the next couple of years, we really need, and there's not, granted, this year time to prepare this in whole with that in mind.
Mhm.
But there sure is gonna be next year, there sure is gonna be the year after, and you're going to. We could start thinking along this path now, or we're just drastically gonna take a pen to it. Which I don't wanna have to do, so we need to start thinking along that line in every area. So,
And this is really good because, so a lot of what I did was based on last year and I just need direction. If, you know, if you want things cut, that's no problem. I just,
we just need to be thinking, it's just,
Yep.
the way we have to think about budgets. Starting now is where do we need to deploy this money and where do we not need to? And my last question on the same thing is before I start thinking on professional services and legal, page 9. I understand last year's expenditure because we have an awful lot of reasons that have in-house court, legal time. A lot of different reasons. But that was an outlier year. Why are we budgeting 150 grand when the last couple of years before that were 50, 80, right in there? Why are we bumped up to 150 grand?
it's. Which one are you looking at?
Professional services, legal and other.
Oh, between the two of them, you mean?
Well, I understand last year's outlier expenditure
So legal is 35,000.
says 149.
Which page are you on?
Nine.
Page 9.
Am I the wrong?
Oh, page 9, sorry, I was, so let me put it back over. Oh, because it's a combination, actually, I am gonna need that, I do need that spreadsheet, because that's got what all is in there. Because, legal is only 35,000 in the general fund. Let's see, legal and other.
There it is, Debbie.
Okay, so it has 35,000 for legal. The $25,000, the software selection is gonna get pushed off to next year. There's 18,2 for IT.
Probably
I
Radcom.
think that's, you're right, actually, that one is RadComp.
Which is community and recruitment.
Those are yours, Jen, the video, the community, and not the
So,
recruitment.
Yeah,
PR.
the video is public information, budget, that was going to include video production. Community benefit initiative, that's, what we've carried over in the past, includes all of our public information and communications. We're hoping to hire a contractor to handle that this year. Probably around a $30,000 contract to do, all of our PR. And then the 20,000 in recruitment was, placeholder for some of those incentives for hiring that we talked about at spring planning.
Right, HR answers.
HR, yeah.
Could that contract then incorporate in the another $23,000 for a newsletter?
That,
I mean,
I don't.
or is that just what they charge us to print the thing?
The newsletter is the second one from the bottom. Oh, here, you gave me the clicker. Sorry, you
Yeah,
gave
okay,
me
so
power.
And then another 12 grand.
So
for
there's
press
the 23
Yeah,
and then 12,000 for the press releases.
Debbie, I suggested. Just too much paper, take those line items out of that. legal and other part, I'm always kind of. Amused with others that could take in a lot of ground. And
Yeah.
in this case, it did take in quite a bit, so I just think if we spread that out.
Yeah.
It maybe would be better.
We'll give you a
Yeah.
public relations line item, Fort newsletter is public relations, press releases is public relations, a $36,000 contract is public relations, now we're up to almost $80,000 for PR.
I think,
Can you hire somebody or not? Probably not, but make it a line if that's.
I think part of the issue too is that as we go through this transition, we need to have a little additional beef on the PR side as we try to communicate that we're not gonna be having the tolls for the parks. And that-
23.5 is just the printing and postage. That's not the graphic design and
just like-
that's just a hard cost. And the advertising is display advertising. It's what we use for all of our legal notices and things like that.
It'd be easier for me to read if it wasn't listed under other.
Yeah.
It's actually like a PR line item, then you can make it little drop downs into the PR, right? Okay.
Well, and going forward, I want to give Jen like her own department so that, because otherwise I'm sitting here going, well, this is partly Jen's and partly somebody else and all that. And next year it's gonna look very different.
Perfect.
And I think.
You can hold me to it, I promise.
I think as clear as we can make those kinds of things, like where it is and who it is and what it is.
Yeah.
Now, the easier it's gonna be when we do have to start making some adjustments as we move
Right.
forward and easier to identify where we can and when we can. Because yes, PR and outreach is gonna be, have to be humongous over the course of the next couple of years. After that, it's not as much, but we need to be able to know where that is.
Would any of those costs be absorbed by the new bridge effort? Seems like, you know, the new bridge is what's causing that, wouldn't that? Some of
No,
those
the new
costs
bridge,
be,
the new bridge is gonna partner, for likely the next year. And then you're gonna see things are gonna start to diverge when the new authority's in place and we've got a little bit of separation there. We're still gonna have to work very well together between the two organizations, but the message is gonna be much different going forward. Once we make that one stand up. I mean, the port is gonna be, I think the message is gonna be, we're changing the way we're operating. There's some things that we did in the past, we're no longer gonna be able to do unless we can find revenue streams to pay for that. And that could be through additional taxes, blah, 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 blah. That's a message. On the bridge, it's gonna be more of, hey, construction's underway, be careful safety wise in the water, here's the interface, you know, with the.
yeah, I understand that, but aren't those additional costs that the port will be absorbing due to a new bridge being built? That's not ours. I'm just trying to, I'm just trying to be.
Like who's getting compensated for what?
Yeah, do you get what I'm saying, though? It just
Well
seems
said.
like there's some
Yeah.
gaps in where. What port
Okay,
keeps
so if I
carrying
put
as a
my foot
financial
head
load
on-
and where the bridge
You're
actually
absolutely
picks
right.
up and takes it. That's all I'm saying. There appears to be a gap between where the bridge picks up finances and deals with it themselves. And how long we support them. And I haven't been in agreement with that alignment from day one, so I'm just. As I don't have much to lose these days, I'm bringing it up. Because I think it needs to be heard.
I can second that. Short time or two. I agree with that, but.
The
I
key
just
thing
think
is
it
we
needs to be
need an
heard.
interface agreement that clearly describes that.
So, and just one, this is a really minimal budget to talk about that transition off of tolls. And most of it is directed to the users of the facilities that will have their fees increased. But this budget does not anticipate, for example, if this commission chooses to go for a 5-year operating levy. That is a completely different animal with a completely different communication needs budget. This budget does not anticipate that. So everybody should understand that if we are going to look at increasing property taxes to fund government activities, especially with the waterfront parks, this budget doesn't anticipate that effort.
So, if we're gonna stay for 2 hours, we're getting close to the end here.
Well, these are good questions. You got questions for Debbie, now's the time.
If I
Yeah,
go
that's
to-
why I'm just to questions.
If I go to the last page of your package, I'd appreciate if you would take the group through the same thing you took me through, to give them perspective of. When the basic question is, by the end of this year, what are you projecting? To be the deficit for non-bridge related. Charges, and it's not really a deficit.
No, I mean, I think overall this budget does show that we're actually in pretty good shape. Because a lot of the negative, when you do the math and you end up with a negative number, a lot of it is from the capital outlay and or the debt that we're paying off. So I tried to really look at operations when I was putting this together, look at the revenue that's coming in and what are we spending and are we way out of whack? As a technical term, and I would say that we're not way out of whack as far as that goes. So I didn't feel too bad about this budget as far as like when we talk about getting off of tolls and things like that. So on page 37, the last page, it's broken out. This is kind of a twisted version of what Kevin and I have shown you before. So it takes all all of our asset centers or business centers, if you will, and puts them on the left-hand side and then kind of shows their little income statement for each one. So you have the revenues that come in, and that's true revenues. So that is for the bridge, it's tolls, for the industrial properties and the commercial properties, it's leases, et cetera, et cetera. And then it shows the personnel services, what they're budgeted at, the materials and services. And so it kind of gives you that net operating revenue. So you can kind of see, especially for, you know, the industrial buildings and that we're in positive territory there for the majority of it. The lower mills portion of it, we've known that, you know, that needs to be developed or something. And so that's the one that's negative there. Greg's working on the commercial buildings, so we can work on getting that in a more positive situation. As far as the waterfront goes, that's lots 1 and 900, again, undeveloped land that we're trying to figure out what to do with. The waterfront, we've talked about that, the event site and that you know, that it's a park service basically. So you can kind of see that we're not in too bad of shape when you talk about just
Yeah.
operation.
One of the things like the airport bill, that just amazes me. Our income's $294 and we spend $220,000 on personnel. Now, something's wrong. They aren't driving their tractors fast enough. That's all I can say.
And we
I
will-
watch 'em.
And we will be looking at that. That's
I
one of,
don't think I can't see that's at all. I mean, that's 3 full-time, well-paid people.
yeah, and we will be looking at that. We need to get the new software in place so we can track people's
Okay.
time better.
Because something's going on there. I mean, they aren't out there that much. There's not that many people out there.
Doesn't that include admin? though,
Yeah, it
as
does
well?
include admin, so it includes Greg's
But
time.
tonight, it's all on the other chart. I see that.
Yeah, yeah.
Denny traffic
Yeah.
is a little high, but I gotta, and the only reason I talk about the airport, because it's the one thing I do know about.
Yeah, yeah, and you do see it, right? Yeah.
And I said, look
Yep.
at it, but I think if that's high and these figures can't be right, I think, well, how many of the other ones?
Well, so
I mean,
the
yeah.
total personnel services is what it costs. And so if we take it out of the airport, it's gotta go somewhere
Go
else.
somewhere
So
else.
my goal though is
Well,
to
put
get
it
it.
in the marina, because they look better.
No, it needs to go where it belongs. It needs to go where it belongs.
But I do know, I mean, looking at personnel people, you know,
That's
there's
what I'm saying,
47 to
that's where it
51% is for taxes and benefits on wages. That amazes me. I've been out of it for a little while because that's high. So, you know, if you get hiring somebody for $10, which you're not gonna do, that's gonna be another $5 anywhere. So you look at that, it's huge now compared to what it used to be.
Yes,
You know,
and they just keep adding on
I know
more.
they do,
Yeah.
yeah.
What adds up to $450,000 of materials and services on the Halyard building this year?
Halyard. What are we doing at Halyard? What is Halyard? What is that? Mike?
That would be on the Excel sheet.
Well, let me look real quick here and see what we have in there. Halyard is, let's see. I think that's a typo.
I think it's too.
Yep, that one's a typo. good eye on that, because it should only be 38,000.
So its net revenue should be a lot higher than 268,000.
Yeah. Yeah, the Halyard is one of our better
Yeah,
performing
making-
buildings, so yes, sorry, you. I was saying that I hadn't found errors. Not one. It was a test. And I don't know where that number came from, because it should be about 18,000. Yeah, because the rest of them should be right.
Anyway,
Something else jumps out at me.
Your numbers,
One more question.
your number's about $400,000 low on your net revenue.
Right, and that's, yeah. And that's what we were saying.
So
was
it's
that-
twice as big as you thought.
Well, the bridge, yeah. Well, the Halyard actually though, oh, you know what, I bet that there's a formula error in there because the revenue is too high also.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I know, I said.
I'm just wondering,
Guys,
we're asked often to
real
reduce
quick,
rates
John,
and look at how we're weak and our dependability on the bridge
could you
loans.
go, could you
Does
go
the
back
bridge
to this
authority
page?
have a date that they will be off of port dollars? You follow what I'm saying? I mean, we're
We
asking.
need to
for
get
that-
that intergovernment. Who cares, as long as there's an agreement where they're reimbursing every dime the port spends in
Agreed.
material, labor, everything. That's what
Agreed.
that agreement needs to get in place ASAP.
Agreed.
So Debbie, my question for you is, if you go to the very top of page 37. And you go all the way over to the right, if I interpret this correctly. It says that. After you take out all of the expenses on the bridge itself. Including that new incremental tolling that goes to the new bridge. You're still left with a positive $3.66 million, call it $3.7 million. So the question that I have for you is. The revenues on all of the other property, non-bridge related, and the expenses on all of that other property. Does it add to the 3.66 or subtract from the 3.66, and what is the value? So it basically says. How much money this year are you projecting that the bridge tolls are gonna supplement or augment other revenues?
And the bottom line is that it's probably about 400,000
Right.
that they're going to, that it's going to supplement.
Yes.
Now, I do need to jump in here just for a second though, because where that says 3.66 million, that does not include the transfers. To the bridge repair fund to fund the repairs for this year either. So the,
Okay, well, it does show the 3.6.
right, which is what I call the required transfer.
And how much is the other?
I was just looking to see that. The
400.
other is about, no, almost 2 million for the bridge repair.
In general fund as well.
Yeah, and the general fund. So about,
Where do I see that?
it's, well, on page 21 is where I'm looking the transfers out.
You can't see it on this page 37.
No, and that was what I was telling you, that this, I would like this to have one more column that shows the transfers.
But as I remember our discussion earlier, we started the year. That we thought we were augmenting. Other funds by about $1 million. Okay, what this plan shows, that million now is down to about 400,000.
And
Plus or minus a little bit.
yeah, and it's plus and minus because a lot of those numbers, when I say $1 million, that's, or 900,000, that was an average over, it jumps all over the place because it depends on how much capital outlay is being done. So if one asset needs a lot of capital improvement or repair,
Yeah. and
then
plus-
it was bigger in prior years.
and most they find grants to pay for a big. chunk of it.
Right.
Okay, so this plan shows we're well on our way to meeting the 26th date.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that we've always done pretty well operationally. We've always done, our revenues outside of tolls have always done a pretty good job of covering operational costs. It's always been those bigger capital outlays, matches for grants, though, even if we get grants, a lot of times they have matches that have to go with them and things like that.
Yeah, and that kind of comes back to kind of a summary observation. Going forward in the new area, we've got grants and little pieces that go with the grants that we're gonna have to fund. As we move forward, if we're tying up money, budget in projects in a given year that don't get done, they get pushed into the following year, we've missed an opportunity. Right? So if these projects are, some of them are helping us generate more revenue. If we plan for them, we budget for them, and we don't get them done. We've not only lost that opportunity, but we've also lost the opportunity to put something in its place to take over for that, right? So it's kind of a double whammy. So I think going forward, you gotta be more diligent on when we say we're gonna get a project done, we get it done. And if we decide we can't get it done, it behooves us to tell us early. And we have a project ready to go that could slide in, that could replace it. To spend that money. And then start generating revenue. Right. That's a whole different set of skills. Yeah.
I'd just add to that, Commissioner, that majority of our grants come to the FAA, and so they're mostly maintenance and improvements. They're not revenue generating projects. They're just, it's depreciation, making sure the apron is in good shape, make sure the runway's in good shape.
At the airport, I agree with you.
So the
totally.
timetable on the return on that is nil because it's a cost of
Oh,
ownership.
related.
Airport, I agree with you, but even that matching numbers, matching grant. That's a lost opportunity if we don't get that done, because we tied that funds up with that grant. And we've lost that ability to go use it someplace else. That's
Yeah.
my position.
Okay, you know, I already thank you, Mike. And today, take a page 17, page 37. Pretty big jump.
Well, and I do need to clarify something that I said because. I was wrong that I was wrong. That number in Halyard actually is correct. The big chunk there is utilities. That is utilities for Halyard, which they actually reimburse us for. So I have to show the revenue coming in when they reimburse us, and then I have to show that number going out. So Commissioner Shepherd, to your question, that is what that is that it is $435,000 and it is utilities.
Utilities are over 300,000.
What is your number here showing that money that after reimbursement though?
No, they're both gross numbers.
So-
So the rental is gross at 835 and the expenditure is gross at 451.
And where does the 451, when they pay it back to us, show? Where is that gonna show up?
On the revenue side.
On the revenue side. So that's included in the 835 under revenue.
So they're paying us.
They're paying us-
Something a year.
Well, the utility portion of it is a little over 300,000 of that.
But and the rest of it's their rent.
Yep.
So it's there. All right.
So anyway, I did want to clarify that because I thought I had made a mistake because that was a big number, but it is actually correct. They use a lot of energy, yes, they do, but they pay us.
We do have a couple of motions that need to be made.
I'm just waiting for everybody to kind of find out, and figure out they don't have any more questions.
Okay.
Anybody have something in this, budget they want to talk about before we get to, all the action items we're gonna do here today?
Maybe a quick since the big number, the cost of living proposed increase. In there.
The 8.15%, there's a summary of that on page 27 and 28.
We're going backwards.
And part of what I did here, the personnel costs are actually lower than the 22-23 budget. Because there are some positions that have been carried forward in the budget that have never been filled, and I just don't see us filling them. So I took those out. What I did do, though, was I did propose increasing 2 of our part-time people to full-time to help with the software implementation. So I increased a couple of people, but I took some positions out because if you look at actuals from 21 and 22, you can see that 1.8 and then it dropped down to 1.7 in 2022. That was partly because Fred's Fred was gone and so he became a contract. He went from being an employee to being a contract. So that was the biggest reason that 22 is lower than 21. But then when you look at the budget for 22-23, it was 2.5 million. And so then anyway, and I still have it at 2.4 million, but it includes positions that we are trying to fill. So it has empty positions, but we are actually trying to fill those.
So we don't want to put a facility, we're down 3 facilities, we don't want to put at least the opportunity to hire one in there.
They are, that's what I'm saying.
It
I
says 9.
what's that?
It says the same number for last year versus this year.
That's because she took some of those other positions out that we.
No, but he,
But under facilities. it
next
still says
page.
9.
FTE.
Oh,
That's because that is the 9, that is. I didn't take anything out of facilities. And actually. There was, well, let's see, 1.5 unfilled positions is what I removed from the budget. So,
I
but
guess
then,
is there, if it says 9 and 22, 23, and it says 9 and 23, 24, that's saying you're not leaving anything.
right, I left them the same. So they had 9 positions budgeted in 22-23, and I left them at 9 for facilities.
How many are filled right now?
Like I said, all but 3, we have 3 vacancies, so that leaves us with 7 guys, I believe.
So in our
6
budget,
guys.
if you can
Six
hire
guys.
2, it's there.
Yes.
Okay, that
Yep.
was the question.
Yes, so. But the overall budget is for personnel is actually lower than the 22-23 budget, but I think it's closer to accurate. For 23-24. And our healthcare costs were virtually unchanged, which was really nice to hear. PERS didn't change much. This is PERS changes their rates every 2 years, so we're going into our change on July 1. And those were only tier 1, tier 2 actually went down, tier 3 went up. And we do have more tier 3, so we'll see a little bit of an increase in PERS, but not a huge increase. So not a lot of change. The big change is the 8.15% cost of living.
Any other questions?
Oh, God, this getting on the event, sorry. Okay, so we have a couple of things we need to do here. One of them is improving property tax, which is 0.0332 per thousand assessed value for 23-24. And we need a motion to approve that. And second, we need a motion to approve the FY 2023-24 budget as amended. You do those separate years, almost the same motion. Take your pick. I'm separate. I'm not gonna say, we're okay, let's do the property tax levy. Okay. I move that we approve the property tax levy as identified in the figure.
And that's the same one as Ben, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and I have second.
Question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Perfect. Okay, so we're gonna move to approve this budget.
We have to do it.
Who wants to? You go ahead.
Okay, and we'll do improvement shares by Dennis.
Then this is my second. All those in favor? Aye. Oh. I think those are done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Some of these numbers will sharpen up for next year. Yeah.
John, we're sorry to lose you. Even if I know where you're gonna be, which way, that I want to even hear.
Thank you, John. I will miss our budget meetings.
You're happy.
And this is also Hobie's last budget meeting. too.
Yeah, wow.
How many budget meetings have you attended?
It was odd. Last night I opened my ballot up and was there. It was odd.
How many years have you been on?
21.
21st budget committee.
That's amazing.
What are you saying, dude? What are you saying, dude? This is being televised.
Hobie's the longest serving port commissioner ever.
Been good,
Distinctive.
been real good. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Oh, what?
Dude, look at it now.
That's it.
Thank you.
After this, regular meeting.
Here we are, let's, everybody have 2 minutes and then we'll
I'll have
knock
to
that
bet
real
it's
quick.